Now that title might seem like clickbait, but bear with me for a couple of minutes and I'll explain myself. Baldur's Gate 3 was a love letter to RPG and D&D fans alike. It was nothing short of a masterpiece that few AAA games with triple the budgets could ever hope to achieve. Now, I'm not implying that Metaphor ReFantazio is on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of technical achievement or scope, nor am I suggesting that Atlus's latest entry gives players the kind of system-breaking freedom that Larian's magnum opus does. What I am saying, however, is that just as Baldur's Gate 3 introduced a new generation of gamers to CRPGs, a supposedly dead genre, it also demonstrated what's possible when a game is created with players, not investors, in mind. I firmly believe that Metaphor ReFantazio has the potential and is shaping up to do the exact same thing for turn-based JRPGs. Now, before we go any further, I'm well aware that Atlus is more than just the Persona series. Unfortunately, though, Persona just happens to be my favorite franchise. So if you don't hear any references to Shin Megami Tensei or Trauma Team throughout this video, that's why. Persona 5 showed the gaming world what a turn-based JRPG could truly achieve. Every frame just oozed style and confidence. The characters were woven into a mature and emotional narrative. The combat mechanics were impeccably fine-tuned, the soundtrack was phenomenal, and those menus were pure art. More recently, Honkai Star Rail, a free-to-play turn-based JRPG by miHoYo, the creators of Genshin Impact, has given new life to the genre, allowing a brand new audience to experience JRPGs without spending a single dollar, unless of course they want to. With the Metaphor ReFantazio prologue demo done and dusted, I can confidently say that Persona 5 ran so ReFantazio could sprint. ReFantazio plays like a love letter to JRPG fans with that typical Atlus style, something that's fantastic to experience, especially when Final Fantasy is now a generic action combat ballfest. I'm currently playing on PC, powered by an AMD Ryzen 5800X and an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 Ti, which is a pretty solid rig by most standards. I'm very happy to report that Metaphor ReFantazio ran buttery smooth. While it's not a game that will be pushing many systems to their absolute limits, I mention this because many players reported performance issues when the demo launched, ranging from frame rate drops to hard crashes. Hopefully, this will be ironed out when the game fully releases on October 11th. For this playthrough, I'm currently on normal difficulty, a personal tradition of mine when it comes to Atlus titles. I usually start on normal, followed by a second playthrough on hard or merciless for completion's sake. I'm also using a controller, don't know, just feels better, and playing with the English dub. Atlus's localization is arguably among the best in the industry, if not the best, with no nuance or emotion lost in translation. ReFantazio shifts from the modern-day drama-filled classrooms of Shujin Academy or the bustling streets of Tatsumi Port Island to the medieval high fantasy world of Eurocon. Here we step into the shoes of a fully voice-acted nameless protagonist tasked with delivering a message to the loyal ally of the prince after the king's assassination. So we're not breaking any molds with the narrative setup, that's for sure. It's simple but effective. The most immediately noticeable change is the beautifully rendered environments. Developed with P Studio's proprietary engine, the landscapes not only tell a visual story, but they also pay homage to JRPGs of yesteryear, while highlighting Atlus's evolution as a developer. The inclusion of an overworld map, more streamlined environments, and nods to the Persona series are complemented by elements reminiscent of the Tales of, Dragon Quest, or Final Fantasy franchises. While Metaphor ReFantazio may not be winning any awards for visual fidelity, it certainly isn't lacking in detail. The environments are some of the best I've seen in an Atlus-published game, and although the 3D character models feel slightly dated, often missing details, the beautifully animated 2D cutscenes and their incorporation into the moment-to-moment gameplay more than compensate for any artistic shortcomings. As this is just an impressions video, I'll leave the finer narrative details for the full review. However, it's worth noting that if you've watched any anime or played at least one JRPG, you'll quickly recognize some very, very familiar tropes. Now, this isn't a criticism. I adore JRPGs. I've sunk 180 hours into Persona 5. I'm currently working my way through Royal, very, very slowly I might add. I love Persona 3 Reloaded. I adore the Tales of series, and Dragon Quest is amazing. But even I have to admit that the genre's stories often fall into predictability. What makes or breaks a JRPG is its gameplay loop and the supporting systems. A captivating story will only take you so far if the characters are one-dimensional or the combat loop feels stale. On the other hand, a mediocre story can be elevated by a well-designed combat system and a strong, memorable cast of characters. Now, I'm not suggesting that Metaphor ReFantazio's story is lacking in any way. It's the gameplay framework that really shines. 6 hours in and the narrative has already planted enough seeds to keep me well and truly invested. But it's the surrounding systems that are absolutely phenomenal. Let's talk mechanics. If you have played Persona 5, then you'll feel right at home in ReFantazio. Although it would be irresponsible of me to go through every single active mechanic you'll be engaging in, I want to highlight just a few. ReFantazio will have you managing your relationships with other characters, increasing their bond level, as well as improving our personality traits such as courage, and most interesting of all, we can allocate 2 stat points upon leveling up. The build I've decided to carve out for the main character is a magic and luck based setup. Don't ask me why, it just felt natural. Now when it comes to combat, I'm still struggling with retraining my brain when it comes to attacking enemy weaknesses. Rather than opening the enemies up for a team attack, instead the character will have an extra move. Adversely, I've found that if you don't exploit enemy weaknesses, the third character in the attack line will miss their turn entirely. This became incredibly frustrating when I encountered the final boss of the prologue. Our main mode of attack revolves around archetypes. These represent powerful heroes and kings of the past. However, I suspect the past, quote unquote, might actually be a metaphor for other stories. For example, when we're introduced to the very first archetype, the Seeker, the still image displaying its origins is very reminiscent of Don Quixote. Each archetype functions more or less as a class, bringing its own specialization, be it strike damage, slash damage, magic, and so on, as well as a corresponding gear set. For example, if you've equipped the mage archetype, you'll only be allowed to equip a staff, nothing else. Unlike, say, Persona, where each character could only be equipped with one particular weapon and armor set. Speaking of Persona, I know, I'm sorry, there only the protagonist could freely change their abilities by equipping different persona. In ReFantazio though, you can customize the entire party's abilities. If you want a full team of melee focused builds, go for it, it's entirely possible. Although I'm not sure why you'd want to, but hey, the option's there. I'm really curious to see how this will affect late game encounters. The combat loop is designed around exploiting enemy weaknesses and managing resistances, much like Persona 5. In fact, in one specific encounter in Persona 5, a precise setup down to persona abilities was required to even begin to think about succeeding. I expect the same depth of strategy will be necessary here in ReFantazio, making enemy weaknesses and resistances critical as you progress. How they'll balance out archetypes is something I'm very excited to see. Archetypes can be equipped from the Academia, a pocket dimension and ReFantazio's equivalent of the Velvet Room. Here, under the guidance of a mysterious figure, players can purchase archetypes using Magula, the game's equivalent of mana. Once purchased, archetypes can be freely swapped, a feature I particularly appreciate. One significant change that caught me completely off guard, pleasantly I might add, is that if your protagonist falls in battle, it will no longer result in an instant game over, unlike Persona. There, if your character got hit with an instant kill move, that was it. Hopefully you weren't almost finished with defeating that boss. While it made sense narratively, as the protagonist was often the cause of and the solution to the plot, it unfortunately also enforced one particular playstyle, ensuring the protagonist was always the best equipped, often at the expense of other party members. With those restrictions lifted, ReFantazio really feels like it's wanting to open itself up to new players. Finally, I have to highlight the music. The Persona series has consistently delivered some of the best soundtracks in gaming, blending hip-hop, rock, jazz, and funk. I'm yet to hear an OST more iconic than Persona 5's. ReFantazio is continuing this legacy with some incredible scores reminiscent of Nier Automata. The music has this tribal feel, almost warlike. It aligns perfectly with the game's themes of class divide and tribal conflict. In closing, I stand by my title. ReFantazio feels like a love letter to JRPG fans everywhere, appealing to both veterans and newcomers. My only concern is for those experiencing this game as their first JRPG, as ReFantazio introduces several complex and often overlapping systems within the first few hours, and I can see how some players might be completely overwhelmed. Now, with the developers stating that ReFantazio will offer 80 to 100 hours of content, the $115 price tag seems well worth it, even if Atlus is going to re-release ReFantazio in a year's time. Metaphor ReFantazio will be launching on October 11th, and I, for one, can't wait to play. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Who could do this? Few could even enter the king's chambers, let alone draw close. And yet
His Majesty's arcane power could deflect near any blade. With all the royal bloodline's magic, who could harm him at all?
shadows stir in the castle just as they did with the prince. What hellbound soul could end a royal life? Who would dare such atrocity? Huh?
Luis.
A shame to die with no heirs. The prince was taken too soon. And only a king may wield the royal scepter, the very crux of his vaunted bloodline's magic, which made such a fine deterrent to war. One has to ask, them dead, who shall take the throne?